They have all dedicated their lives in service of this nation and the American people. You've all been appointed by the President, the Senate, and the Senate Majority and Minority Leaders, the Speaker and Minority Leader of the House, and the Chairman and the Ranking Members of both the House and the Senate Armed Services Committee. We've been meeting monthly since we organized on September 19th of last year in preparation for this rollout and for us undertaking our official duties. The Commission on Military, National, and Public Service was created by Congress to review the selective service system, to look at the potential need for a draft, and to consider methods to increase participation in military, national, and public service. Our mission is to listen to the American people from all walks of life. We want to learn from those who have served, who have yet to serve, and understand the barriers to that service. Develop recommendations that will help increase a greater ethos for service to this nation, and help those who actually want to reach out and start to serve attain their dreams. Over the course of the next 2 years, we hope to ignite a national conversation around service. And we need the help of every single one of you in this room. Not just you, but your friends and your family, to get engaged, to join this national conversation. Ultimately, our goal is to transform that national conversation into a series of recommendations for you, the American people, for the President, and for Congress that leads every American citizen to be eager and inspired to serve. We will start that conversation by visiting all regions of the country over the next 6 months. And I'm pleased to announce that our first visit will be to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area, February 22nd and 23rd. Please make sure you keep up with our website, which is inspiretoserve.gov, to check the calendar as we schedule more of these national meetings and conversations. And we ask that you put this information out throughout your networks so that we have people from those areas come to participate so that we can listen to them. I'd like to thank you to join us today. The Commission has received unparalleled bipartisan support, and we look forward to working with members of both parties as we begin this journey. Before introducing the members of Congress in attendance and offering them the opportunity to make a few remarks, I would like to read a quote from Senator McCain, one of the primary sponsors of the Commission. Quote, "When Jack Reed and I led the effort to establish this Commission, we hoped it would be a catalyst for an important national conversation on military and public service. Our nation is at a crossroads, and we must decide how we want to foster a culture of service among American men and women from all walks of life. I encourage everyone with an opinion to share their views with the Commission as it develops its recommendations." With that, Senator Jack Reed, who is a true service champion, is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy and served in both the active Army and the reserves for over 20 years. A banker, lawyer, he has represented the great state of Rhode Island, first in the House of Representatives and now in the U.S. Senate, where he is the ranking member on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Reed. Thank you.
Well, let me thank Chairman Heck not only for that very kind introduction, but for his distinguished public service, which continues. Thank you, sir. And it is good that he read the comments of Senator John McCain, because there's no more example of public service, lifelong public service, than John McCain. So we're all lucky to have him. It's a pleasure to know him. I also want to thank all the members of the Commission and the distinguished individuals that are helping out. Also, my House and Senate colleagues that will join later. I hope we have votes going on and all sorts of activities, so please forgive us. I will not be able to stay for panel discussion, so I won't be able to listen to General Richardson tell me exactly what I should be doing. He usually does, so you are. And Dave Rodriguez, who is abnormally tall, but that's okay. These are old and dear friends, so I feel the Commission is in good hands. This Commission's importance cannot be overstated. The immediate legislative concern that prompted Senator McCain, and he was gracious enough to ask me to help, is the collective service system. As the Department of Defense moved to open up all military positions to service by women and the related issues requiring the registration of women for the draft. All of that raised significant issues, and we wanted the expertise of distinguished Americans to help us through those issues. When we are considering the registration, for example, I think the growing perception is that women have to be part of it because they are so much part of the service. Winston's an example of that. But that has something that we have to do legislatively, and we look for your guidance as we go forward. We are also in a situation where we hopefully explore, and you explore, the accession standards to the military. Today, barely 25% of America's youth aged 17 to 24 even qualify for military service, regardless of their propensity to serve. Some want to serve, they can't serve. These standards have generally worked very well for the last 50 years, but I think we have to look again at these standards. I remain convinced that there's a large number of individuals in that unqualified group that could serve today because some of the demands, cyber technology, sophisticated technical aspects might not require the same standards that in 1941 generated our Army and similar enlistments in the Navy and the Air Corps. So that's one issue I hope you can concentrate on. We also are looking at the utility of the draft just in general. We want to be able to access individuals again in this new world who might be linguists, cyber specialists, mathematicians, etc. So we might think, and you might think about narrowing the draft to specific functions, not the broad-based national service. That's another area where we need your advice. We haven't reached a conclusion. We certainly need your advice. And we also want to look at where we can foster, as Chairman Heck said, not just military service, but national service. And that's why I'm very pleased that President Mark Aaron is involved. He's a distinguished history with national service beyond just the military. Because I think there's something, frankly, that we've lost in the course of professionalizing our military forces, and that is, growing up back in the 60s, we all assumed we were going to go in as men in the Army, or at least deal with that. And it developed a national sort of social fabric. Your experience in the military, your appreciation for those who serve, everyone seems to serve. And I think that fabric has frayed and eroded. And we have to rebuild it, not just by putting people in the military forces, but encouraging them to go into national service, into VISTA, into CIDIA, into a host of programs that can give them not only an opportunity to serve, but also give them the sense and the satisfaction of serving. They've done something for the country. They're not just idle bystanders on what goes on. It's their country. They did it. They're going to make sure they're going to continue to do that. Developing that active citizenship is a very, very important part, I think, of national service, and therefore something that we really look forward to use. We have had a situation where national service has been very, very, very important to all of us. And I think we have seen it, and we want to see it, as I said, extended, not just to the traditional draft system military, but to all aspects of American life. For example, what about our State Department and Foreign Service? Is there a mechanism we can use to encourage, to facilitate individuals to join the Foreign Service? And we have the Peace Corps, as Mark's very familiar with. What about using that as a bridge to service overseas as a diplomat? There's so many different things we can do. I want to just end by two quotes which I think capture this feeling. One is by Lee Hamilton, and many of us had the privilege of knowing Lee as a member of the House of Representatives and chairman of the 9/11 Commission. And he said, "I can assure you public service is a stimulating, proud, and lively enterprise. It's not just a way of life, it is a way to live fully. Its greatest attraction is the sheer challenge of it, struggling to find solutions to the great issues of the day. It can fulfill your highest aspirations The call to service is one of the highest callings you will hear in your country can make. And again, those are the words of the distinguished American. Let me conclude with the words of another distinguished American. And I hope I don't slip into my Massachusetts accent. But in 1961, John F. Kennedy, I'm from Rhode Island, but close enough, said, "Let the public service be a proud and lively career, and let every man and woman who works in any area of our national government, in any branch, at any level, be able to say with pride and with honor in future years, I served the United States government in that hour of our nation's need." We are in, as we always are, an hour of our nation's need. Let us, through your efforts, mobilize America to serve again, to serve well, and then take pride in that service and say again, I served our government in this hour of need. Thank you very
much. Thank you for your insightful comments and your life of service. Unfortunately, with the boat's schedule, and I don't know, I heard a rumor about some pending deadline tomorrow night at midnight. I don't think our other two members have been able to arrive yet. So what I'd like to do is ask the two vice chairs to please come up. We'll get a picture with Senator Reed. One more right here. All right, just in time. We're going to have to tap dance, tell a few jokes. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce a member of Congress from the great state of Colorado, my former colleague, Mike Coffman. Representative Coffman has served our country in many ways. He enlisted in the active Army at the age of 17, then went into the reserves after his initial enlistment. I don't know why, but then he went into the Marine Corps, and after serving in the Marine Corps, served in the Marine Corps Reserve. In Colorado, he served as a state representative, followed by being the state treasurer, then the Secretary of State, and he's represented Colorado's 6th District since 2009, and currently serves as the chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Military Personnel.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, General. Thank you for your continued service to our country and sharing. I think this is a very important task before us right now, or before the country. Let me just end. I took General Heck's place as a subcommittee chairman for military personnel in the House Armed Services Committee, and I see a lot of familiar faces here today. Jeanette, who is begging to have her position back with the committee, I hope. I think that this is, the timing of this is so important right now, because I think that you're all going to have to make a decision or a recommendation to the Congress of the United States as to what the future of selective service is. And the fact is that we have a constitutional case law dating back to, I think, 1981 concerning whether or not the requirement of women to register as well. And so I think that, quite frankly, that the way the current policy stands, it's not constitutional. Because of the fact that, I think if you look back at that case law, it states that it challenged the registration system and said that because women were not required to register as draft, and it said at that time that that's okay because they don't serve in combat roles. Well, we know that it's no longer the case. So that needs to certainly be looked at. What I want to do is share with you a couple of things. First of all, we put the selective service, the registration requirement, on the shelf before. In, I think, 1975, I think we ended the draft, ended taking draftees in 1973, following the Vietnam War, the end of U.S. participation from the ground component in that war, and then in 1975, they put the registration requirement on the shelf. And then it wasn't until 1980 that it was taken off the shelf and reactivated when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. President Carter did it as a show of force to reinstitute the registration requirement, a show of force to the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union. I just want to say one of the things that certainly we'll be looking at in the personnel subcommittee and sharing with you is our mobilization capability with our active reserve component for all of our services. If you look at the height of our participation in Iraq and Afghanistan, even though there were incredible stresses on our force, at no point did the Department of Defense consider activating selective service and going to conscription. They recalled individuals. First, when I enlisted in the 1970s, it was a 6-year aggregate requirement. In whatever active or active reserve committee you had, the balance of that was on an active status where you could be recalled. That's been extended since then to 8 years, where it is right now. And so we had individuals, certainly I've volunteered out of retirement, but there were many Marines who had been out for 2 years, 2 years or less, were recalled to active duty and sent to Iraq and I believe to Afghanistan as well. And so there is an incredible reserve of qualified individuals right now that we can call upon. If we look at, I believe that the Army Recruiting Command has recently come up with a study, and in their analysis, I believe somewhere around 75% of young people are ineligible to serve given Army standards today. Either they're overweight, they don't have high school. I couldn't have gotten in under under the requirements of today. I finished high school under an Army program, but you have to have high school. You not only have to have high school, you have to have a high enough score on the ASVAB test. Obviously, you have to have emotional fitness. You have to. You can't be overweight. You can't have altercations with the law. Ongoing drug and alcohol issues. I mean, we're talking about 75% men, by their analysis, men and women of military age. And so I think that's extraordinary when you think about that. And so I don't envy you in your task. It's not going to be an easy one, but I think it is so critical to this country right now. In whatever direction you take, certainly the Congress will certainly pay attention to the decision you make. And I just want to thank you for all of you who have served our country, are still serving our country, and all of you who are volunteering to be here today on this important task. General Heck, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. Thanks.
I'm very confident for your first taking the time to come over and for your long-time service to the nation and the people of Colorado. I'd like to ask the Vice Chair to come back up and grab a picture. Before I invite Ms. Wada to come back up and transition us to the panel, I just want to take a point of personal privilege and recognize one other individual in the room and thank him personally on behalf of the Commission, and that's Lieutenant Colonel Mark Austin. Colonel Austin, raise your hand. As with most temporary startup federal agencies, there's a lot of work to do with no authorization and no money. And a definitive timeline to get your work done. And so we were trying to figure out how we were going to get started with no money, no employees, no place to meet. And fortunately, Colonel Austin stepped up in his current position in the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness and took the lead in procuring space, along with Ms. Barna, who's helped us tremendously He's about to leave that position, go off and take battalion command at Fort Stewart, Georgia. So we wish you well in your future endeavors. And on behalf of the commission, thank you for all your help and support.
So if you give us a few minutes, we're going to reconfigure the front. If you want to take a quick break, but please come back because the next part of this event is going to be fantastic. We have 4 great panelists that we're going to hear from. We have a special guest that's come all the way from Delaware that I think you all want to hear from. So thank you very much. Give us a few minutes and we'll get this set up.
All the schools are closed. Water? So anyway, it's all good. They were just staying for it.
Nice to see you here.
No,
Must be my second row, right? Thanks.
Conference. Yeah, exact same time.
Yeah.
No, basically. So you're with your local accent. What's the event?
There you go. Very good.
Give you a hug.
No problem. Very good.
Thank you.
You ready to go?
I guess this is a warm up before that.
Great. And you will see this on the hill, right?
Yes, over the summer.
Awesome. Okay, so you're good?
Yep.
All right, thanks. I'm in the back for you.
Thank you.
And I was like, sorry about that. And I just like kind of
If I just have everyone's attention, I think we're ready to go. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you enjoyed our press conference, and I think that this part of the event is going to be really exciting to hear from. We have 4 very exciting, interesting individuals to begin our panel discussion. So I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for today, the Vice Chair for National and Public Service, Mark Barron. Mark has served in multiple ways as the President of Hobart and William Smith Colleges, the Director of the Peace Corps, the Director of Communication and Deputy Chief of Staff for the White House, and he has been appointed to numerous commissions, boards, task forces on civil engagement and public service. And without further ado, Mark.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that nice introduction. And like my fellow commissioners, I'm honored to be a part of this commission, grateful for the leadership of our chair. We saw displayed so amply this morning, and in a great op-ed Casey had in the Hill this week, and we're off and running. And we thank all of you for coming. This is an important launch, important effort to place the marker of the conversation. As Joe Huck said, that we are very anxious and excited about engaging in over the next couple of years. So we thank you for coming, and we thank you for your ongoing engagement with this conversation. It becomes
comes at a very important time, as Senator Reid said, in our nation's history, in a moment where we can, we hope, over the next couple of years, really contribute to the dialogue and the conversation. As Deb said, as the former director of the Peace Corps and having served the Corporation for National Community Service as its board, and most recently as a college president for 18 years, I've seen, like so many folks in this room, the transforming impact of service. And I come to this podium and to this work on the commission from those posts, from the Peace Corps to a college presidency, very excited, very inspired, and exceedingly optimistic about our country, based upon the commitment of service of the millennials, and increasingly Gen Z. And so our work on this Martin Luther King Celebration Week and his inspiration for service. And I think what so many of us see as I look around this room, this is the Mount Rushmore of service, looking around this room here, kind of like a college reunion for all that for service. But you know very well the generation, millennial generation, and those coming after them, their commitment to service. So there are so many exciting opportunities, and that's why I think, speaking for all our commissioners, the opportunity we have to come forth with recommendations could not be more important. As you've heard at the press briefing and our chair's remarks, it's a really engaging period to listen. This is again where we need your help to listen when we go across the country, to engage with the stakeholders that you would commend to us, and to take advantage of the rich panoply of social media, a website that was launched today, InspiredToServe.gov, Twitter accounts, and all the various streams of communication, particularly for millennials and Gen Z that we're going to be employing, and really seeking the kind of ideas and recognizing the aspiration that we all have for our country. Fortunately, from my perspective, we begin this conversation today with a great foundation of service. Again, thanks to so many people in this room and our predecessors in respective positions. Service is really part of the American DNA, from Tocqueville's observations, John McChrystal, and all in between, the icons of service that we've respected through the years. We've seen that. And now our task is, how do we expand, how do we create and foster a greater sense and ethos of service in our country? That was the challenge the Congressman laid before us, and Senator Reid's fine words. And why I'm personally excited, and I think certainly speaking for our commission, in what we've done already in this country, every year, 80,000 Americans raise their hand to be AmeriCorps members. 3,500 Americans raise their hand to serve the most desperate places on the planet as Peace Corps volunteers. 300,000 Americans raise their hands to serve in active military service. Staggering numbers, really incredible service. And those who commit their lives and their talents to state, local, and federal government service. And then, of course, there's the 63 million other Americans beyond that who just volunteer in their respective communities. So our country has such a appreciative dimension of service and commitment to making a difference, a real difference. Americans who serve in the military, AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, City, and all the different contemporary opportunities for service, go on to lead lives of consequence, and that is the opportunity we have for our panel members, for which we're grateful. We'll hear from them in a minute, representing important aspects of the service agenda and conversation. But we wanted to begin and center our conversation by bringing forth a young man who demonstrates the spirit of service and who has lived it. This has been a part of the Commission's agenda. As Chairman Heck said, we've been meeting since September. And each month that we have met, we've asked someone who is committed to service to speak to us. We've had an active military member come and impress us with her perspective. A returned Peace Corps volunteer, a city-year, a teacher, all the different streams. In this cadence that we're hearing from will add to our listening, will inform our perspective and our recommendations. And so today we're fortunate to have Earl Bowman come down from Delaware. He touches every possible base that this commission could imagine: military, national, and public service, based upon Delaware, to the state park, AmeriCorps service, to his work as a volunteer at a very, very young age. So we're grateful for him traveling down from Delaware. So with gratitude for that and respect for his commitment to service, I bring forth Earl Bowman to the podium. Earl, come on up.
Well, hello, my name is Earl Bowman, and standing before a group of people and speaking is really not my thing. I would rather be out on the trail with a shovel in hand, but I am honored to be here and to share my story. My love for the outdoors stems from my childhood. As a family, we always went in the outdoors. We were always hiking, biking, camping, fishing, and even hunting. Life in school wasn't always easy for me. The harder I studied, the harder school was. I was diagnosed with a learning disability in the 3rd grade. By middle school, I discovered the world of volunteering. I frequently went to a nursing home, played cards, dominoes with residents. At nursing home, I learned that I enjoyed helping others. It was nice. Along with being in the outdoors, at 13, I joined a local fire department as a junior member. I'm still a volunteer firefighter, serving my community as a rescue lieutenant. For many years, serving with the fire department, I have seen and experienced many things. But mostly I've learned that I truly love serving and protecting those in my community. After high school, I had a difficult time finding a job. I tried my hand in a few different jobs. Retail really wasn't my thing. Neither was working in a warehouse. So I took some time, thought about my next move. I realized that I've grown up with some really pretty amazing role models. A lot of my family served in the military. My grandfather served in the Army in Vietnam. My great-great-uncle was part of the 82nd Airborne, World War II. And my great-grandfather served in the Great Korean conflict. So those role models were really nice to have in the family. I enlisted in the 166th Air Wing as a service specialist with the Delaware Air National Guard. Being in the military, I learned the importance of a team and how every individual is an important link to our chain. We form an amazing bond and become a family. Everyone I served with came from different backgrounds, dealt with different life struggles. But that didn't matter because we were all one team with the same common goal. Once my term was over, I was again at a crossroad. What to do with my life? My mom gave me some information about AmeriCorps and a position with Delaware State Parks Veteran Conservation Corps. She said this would be a good fit because it combined my love for service and my love for the outdoors. My response to her was, maybe. This continued every day for about 2 weeks until I finally told her I would give it a try. I mean, what did I have to lose? As soon as I started, I knew this was right for me. Just a suggestion, it comes to moms, they generally know what's best. Just don't tell my mama said. Having the opportunity to be part of the Veterans Conservation Corps has grown with me and was an amazing experience. You get so much from it. It has a lot of military structure because you serve side by side with many and fellow veterans and their family members. We bond as a team and we have a common goal to repair and maintenance our state parks. I learned so much to help my career. I have trained on environmental stewardship, trail maintenance, wildland firefighting, certified interpretive guide, playground safety, and CPR first aid. I learned how to properly use and maintain chainsaws and how to build a trail from beginning to end. Near the end of my service, I was offered a job with Delaware State Parks. But first I had to finish my service commitment. So I did. I am proud to be part of the Delaware State Parks Trail Team. I plan to use my AmeriCorps Education Award to finish training towards becoming a community paramedic for the state of Delaware. I can say that I struggle with self-confidence. I also can say that my service experience in the military and AmeriCorps have given me so much more confidence. Gave me more skills, more knowledge, and a sense of mission, a path for the future, a chance to be in the outdoors. Most of all, gave me happiness to give back to the community and country. Service changed my life. Thank you.
I'm going to take you on the road, Sharon, right? That was fantastic. I should tell you, your mother was listening during the Facebook Live feed. Hashtag I told you so. But no, we thank you. We thank you for your service, for bringing forth all that you did. Your colleagues came down with you from Delaware. We thank you for your service as well to the state and AmeriCorps as well. Thank you so much. Well, inspired to serve. Here we go. Well, it's now my pleasure to bring forth our panel. I invite you to take our seats up here. Board members. Serving Earl's story is powerful, and so many of us have seen other examples of young people and people young at heart who have committed themselves to service. And so over the next coming months, the Commission will be listening around the country to their stories and lifting up examples as we think through recommendations to inspire more Americans to serve. So with our successful set change now, we have a real opportunity to engage in conversation with all of you. With our four distinguished panelists, they're leaders in their field who have led lives of service. Their biographies are in your program before you, so I will not rehearse that in detail, but you will see, as we did, their extraordinary commitment to service and their excellence in their respective fields. But let me briefly bring forth our panelists and then get to some conversation. First, Eduardo Martinez, who is president of the UPS Foundation. He's also UPS Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Shirley Sagawa is well known to so many of us as president and CEO of Service Year Alliance. We especially thank Shirley because she answered the call to service at 7 a.m. this morning when one of our panelists' flight out of Atlanta was canceled, and she filled in short order, and we thank you for that, Shirley. Lieutenant General Laura Richardson, the Deputy Commanding General of U.S. Armed Forces Command, and Ambassador Francis Taylor, who's president of FX Taylor Associates. So welcome all, and thank you for joining us. So let's just perhaps begin the conversation. You can start anywhere down there. You have a mic. Whatever. You can start, and perhaps a bit of a self-introduction in terms of where service is centered in your life and some of the issues that you glean from that and would come into us as a beginning frame.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to say congratulations to the Commission for this launch date, for this very, very important mission, and also say that it's an honor for me to be here on behalf of UPS, and that's United Parcel Service. So the 110-year-old company with service in its name, I've got a lot to tell you about our community engagement. And I think that we were asked to talk a little bit about our personal experience and our professional engagement in service. And I gave it some thought, and I think there was two sort of life events that really shaped my perspective. First is I was born in Cuba, and really had to flee Cuba with my family in 1960. I was an infant, and we went to New York City, then in Miami, but really at an early age, I saw the importance of community outreach, I saw the importance of family and how communities come together, and really probably the most humane act is extending a helping hand to someone in need. And I think that that was in a very important era of my life, growing up as an immigrant, really as a refugee, and seeing how the community outreach to us and really helped my family, who left very well-established life in Cuba, really establish themselves in this great country. Not too long after that, I joined UPS. And really, I was 16 years old in Miami, and I was hired as a package unloader. And quite frankly, throughout my 41-year career with UPS, service was required, is encouraged of all of its people, from the front line to the CEO. And I look forward to talking more about that, to talking how important it is for the private sector to be involved in service, and how the private sector really wants to be involved. So thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to serve because I wanted to help end poverty in America, and I decided the best way to do that would be to go work for the Senate. I don't know if I would choose that today, but I had the opportunity to work on national service legislation as a pretty junior person there, and drafted the first national service bill that created a demonstration program. Got appointed to the commission that implemented that with my colleague Alvin Casey, and under President George H.W. Bush, and had a real opportunity that at a pretty young age to try to figure out what should the federal role look like. Went on to serve with President Clinton in the White House, drafting the AmeriCorps legislation and then setting up the Corporation for National Service in AmeriCorps. So I have a kind of policy wonk claim to connection to this, although I'll do tons of volunteering, I promise. Currently, I'm running the Service Year Alliance, which is chaired by General Stan McChrystal. General Rodriguez is on our leadership council. We have many wonderful people who are stepping up because they believe that a year of service should be a common expectation and opportunity. So that's what we work on. And I'm really honored to have a chance to pinch hit here. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
Okay, so I didn't know I wanted to serve before I started serving. And so I'll start with that up front. And so how could that be as I'm sitting here today? But I think that the growing up in a family, my parents always seemed to be a couple steps ahead of me. Making sure I was always busy and I was never getting in trouble, and I always had too many things to do. So they got me involved in sports when I was very young. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and so all kids were in sports. And so that took a lot of our time. I did go on to be a Colorado State champion in swimming. Started at 8 years old and then went through college. And I think that built in the discipline and a work ethic. I think that is important for military service. And I think while in high school, I started working on my parents got me started taking flying lessons. And so that was even more study, because you had to study to learn all the things in order to get your rating. And I think he had all this, they had this plan mapped out for me before I even knew it. And then as soon as I started college, then my dad said, "Hey, you need to go to this class this coming Thursday." And it was actually at a different school. And it was Air Force ROTC. So I went up there, and I didn't know quite what to think. I wore a uniform. I had a funny-looking beret hat that I wore around the campus. I didn't look like many of the other people that were on campus, and so I wasn't sure if I liked it or not. And plus, I was commuting to another school. So during that year, I think was a pretty telling year, freshman year in college. I thought that maybe it might be for me, but maybe this wasn't the right service. And I think the commuting thing had a lot to do with it too. So I looked around at the other services, the Navy, I went to talk to them, the Marine Corps, and the Army kind of seemed to be the best fit. They had helicopters. I thought, okay, well, I'm taking my flying lessons. I think my dad wanted the service to pay for my flying lessons. They never did, but until I started flying helicopters, and then they did. But it was a door that opened in terms of ROTC, that it made me start thinking as somebody who didn't grow up near a military installation. Fort Carson was a couple hours away, and we sometimes heard about Fort Carson, but not a lot. I didn't have JROTC at my high school, and so I just didn't grow up around the military at all. My dad was very patriotic. He was in ROTC but had a medical disqualification, so he couldn't commission. He was drafted twice in 56 and 65. Again, couldn't go into the service. But interestingly enough, 20 years later, he was able to go into the reserves and serve for 18 years as a medical doctor in the reserves and individual ready reserves. And I had a grandfather that served in World War I and World War II, but not a lot of military experience. So the ROTC opened up a lot of doors. It got me thinking. I was taking pre-med in college, possibly to follow in my father's footsteps, and then I was taking these flying lessons. And so at the college that I transferred to take Army ROTC, offered a professional pilot, so that was my minor degree that I was working on. And so it just got you thinking. And I know that when I graduated, I got accepted to medical school and flight school for Army, and so I decided to go to flight school because my eyesight might not last long enough, but maybe I could always go to medical school. But most of my friends, I had a good number of friends that had gone to the School of Mines, that was a pretty good engineering school. But they graduated and most of them didn't have jobs. And they had student loans to pay. Within a month of my graduation, I was at Fort Rucker, Alabama. I was going through my leadership training. I was wearing a uniform every day, and I was getting paid, and that was pretty doggone exciting. And so, and then shortly thereafter, I started my helicopter training. So, I just think I'm also married to another service member, Major General Jim Richardson. We've been married for 30 years. We got married very early in our career, so we have served together, and we've made a life in the Army. We have one daughter. She's 29. She has her own family now. She's not in the military, but she's looks very fondly on her time growing up as a military brat, and I think wouldn't trade it for the world. But anyway, a life of service. I think as we talk about opportunities, I think the education is really important. What our services offer, and I just think that the word doesn't get out enough. And had my dad not, my parents said, go to this class, or go check this out. And like our previous speaker said, Mom was getting after him for a couple weeks. You really got to get the word out. And I think that when folks realize how many opportunities are out there, really makes the difference. So.
Thank you. That was outstanding. There's a member of our commission who's particularly prideful of your comments, and that's president of your alma mater, Dr. Jeannie Davidson. So all full circles kind of uniting together, but thank you for those comments. Justin.
Excuse me, my story is pretty simple. I grew up here on Capitol Hill in the 50s, single mother. Most of you weren't born and weren't living around in the 50s, but in the 50s, after the Korean War, there was a show called Combat. Dick Morrow was the lead actor, and it was about leadership in combat during during the Korean War. And I became mesmerized by that show. Watched it every week, followed Dick Morrow and what he was doing, and I decided I wanted to be a soldier. There was also in the 50s, Jet Magazine used to do every week a summary of African Americans in the armed forces. Every week I read Jet, and I followed General Benjamin O. Davis Jr. Because Jet covered him as he kind of walked through the ranks in the military, following his father. And you know, I said, I want to be like General Davis. This was at 8. I was 8 years old. I told my mother, I'm going to go to West Point, and I'm going to be an Army officer. Well, it didn't quite work that way. The idea of joining the military stayed. I was appointed to the U.S. Naval Academy. Did not pass the physical. I applied to several universities, and only one accepted me, University of Notre Dame. Not shabby. Showed up at Notre Dame. First, I was in high school ROTC here in D.C. Every public high school in Washington in the 60s had a high school ROTC program that was mandatory for all male, which was a great start. I was the Corps commander for all the high schools here in Washington when I graduated as a senior. Went to Notre Dame, had a decision, like General Richardson, I went blue as opposed to green, joined Air Force ROTC at Notre Dame. Turned out to be just a wonderful experience, not only for me being one of 26 African Americans on a campus of 7,000 in South Bend in 1966. I found a home in ROTC, and Colonel Dick Ferrari, who I will remember for the rest of my life, was our PAS, and like a father figure to me, and the rest is history. I've always wanted to be in the military since I was 8 years old. I realized a dream, and graduating from Notre Dame as a second lieutenant, and I never looked back during the course of my career. And somehow during the course of that career, other opportunities to serve kept coming, even when my wife said no. And somehow I just kept saying yes, and have had the opportunity to serve in many different capacities, not only in the military, but State Department, Department of Homeland Security most recently, and at the General Electric Corporation, where I was the vice president and the head of the Veterans Net. And so giving back in that way as well.
Well, so let's stay with you for some questions. You're in a perfect position to reflect from your experience in the military, state, homeland security, and the private sector. But over the arc of your career, was Father Hesburgh the president of Notre Dame?
He was.
So imbued with a sense of service, I suspect, right, as an undergraduate. What are some of the elements of service that you would commend to us to be thinking about as a commission? Why people are the propensity to serve, and have you seen it change or evolve over the course of time in the various sectors that you've seen yourself into the military or state, but others that you've seen in other streams of service?
Well, my own experience is that service is very personal. And everyone's not going to join the military, everyone's not going to join government service, but there's an opportunity as you live to give back to your community, to give back to your family, to give back to those that are less fortunate. All of these are opportunities to serve, and I think Father Hesburgh, in his leadership at Notre Dame, I have an autographed picture of him with Dr. King, which was not very popular at the time in terms of the broader community and his relationship with Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement, but he said it's the right thing for America. So my sense of service is doing what's right for America, looking for opportunities. I am passionate about education. All of my charitable donations go back into education, either my high school or Notre Dame, because I think that is, again, how you continue to pay forward the opportunity you've had to serve both in the military and government service and that sort of thing. So I think there are many opportunities. I think they're all sort of personal in terms of how you look at service, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I also think in order for people to understand the opportunity to serve, there needs to be more advertisement and discussion around what those opportunities are. They aren't so narrowly just defined in the military, but AmeriCorps, the Teach for America, and all the other sorts of opportunities that people can give back to this great nation is, I think, what drives my thinking about service.
So Shirley, let's get you into this. You were literally there at the beginning, with the commission, as you said, and with AmeriCorps. And you've written and talked a lot about the importance of service, broadly defined service, and how with scale it can go at some of the nation's most vexing problems. You went into this to eradicate poverty, as you said, as a young Senate staffer. How do you reflect the ambassador's comments here in terms of service and what you see in the field in your work with General Recruit?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I did want to reflect on what I've heard from both of you as well as Earl Bowman, that you serve and then you serve and then you serve some more, and that's very common. There's a lot of people who do, they come out of the military and then they do AmeriCorps or vice versa, or they continue, and there's lots of evidence. People who do AmeriCorps continue to serve throughout their lives. They are civically active, they vote, they solve community problems. And their lives are better. And so, instead of thinking about this as something we sort of impose on people, I'm thinking, you heard about it, you had the opportunity. It's very common for military families to continue the path of younger people serving. So many people aren't asked. When I was growing up, didn't know anybody in the military. I didn't know that women really could be in the military. It didn't occur to me to think about serving, and until I was actually in law school, and I remember getting something in the mail about the JAG Corps, and that was the first time anybody had ever asked me to join the military. I actually thought really hard about doing it. I'd already sort of carved out a different path. So I think there's very much a need to ask, and that people will step up. We have right now about 66,000 people doing a year of civilian service in a service year national service program like AmeriCorps, Youth Build, Peace Corps, or something privately funded. That's not very many. We've done polling and research. There's, with no arm twisting at all. When people hear about the chance, you would easily get 1 out of every 4 or 1 out of every 5 people, and that's without creating this sort of larger expectation in society. So we are leaving so many people without the opportunity to serve because they don't know. They may be turned away from a military recruiter. They may not ever be asked. They may never have heard of AmeriCorps, and we know from polling most people haven't. So, that to me is the question more than that we need to force people. People want to do this. They just don't know about it.
Generally, as you reflect on that in terms of the propensity to serve in the military, similar to the ambassador question, have you seen, over the course of your 30 years, kind of the propensity to serve, has that evolved when you look at those coming into the military now? And what should we be thinking about, to Shirley's good point, to get the word out that there is this desire to make a difference? You all have evidence of that. How do we strengthen that?
I think the propensity to serve is, I think it's declining with with our veterans from the World War II, Korea, and Vietnam as they fade away. And Ms. Watt, I read her article that she did. She did an article about 1.5 years ago just on you can't use yesterday's recruiting tools to recruit Generation Z. And so you have to tap into how you reach out to those people and make them aware. As you were saying, it's a matter of not, I think it's just a matter of not knowing and just not being around it. And as we have a lot of, I can't remember the percentage, but a pretty high percentage of the people that do join the military have a relative in the military. And so it's because they knew someone, they were educated about it, and a lot of our serving folks in the military today have, their children are serving in the military, a lot of them. And so as our veterans are declining and that sort of thing, I think our propensity to serve is declining, unless you have something like 9/11 that happens that spurs on that desire to serve and serve the country and that sort of thing. We are an all-volunteer force in the military, and so that's very, very important to protect that. We went to that in 1973, so that's our military force is made up of all volunteers. And so how do you, that's the difference between the selective service and the all-volunteer military. So how do you reach out? Also, a good point that Senator Reid brought up is the folks that are not eligible to serve. that we're all competing, the military, the private sector, there are a lot of people competing for the same people. We have a pilot shortage going on, not just in our services, but our airline pilots. And so the military is competing for the pilots to serve, and sometimes the military can't do the type bonuses that the airlines can do, but we're all kind of recruiting for that same sliver. And so we do, I think, need to have a conversation too about standards, and that's we don't want to lower standards because we were talking about standards before. We have some pretty tough standards, what Representative Kaufman was saying, and so you don't want to lower standards, but then, when you only got 29%, 31% that are eligible to serve, then what do we do about that?
I don't mean if I talk so much, but I think part of it's not just the military that's struggling to get people who are qualified to do specific jobs. We hear that in industry as well, and I think that part of that is that we as a society haven't figured out a way to help make people healthier and stay out of trouble, so that they end up with criminal records, and figure out how to make sure they graduate from high school. And that's part of the problem, is that we've made the pipeline so small. And one thing that National Service can do is address all of those things. There are evidence-based programs that work in all of those areas. And if we had even 1 million people serving, we could solve these problems at scale. We could have 150,000 people working in early literacy, which we all know pays dividends on the other end. It saves money because people that end up in special ed and remedial programs. We could have 100,000 people building the capacity of substance abuse treatment and prevention centers. And we could make a huge dent, if not eliminate, the problem that we're having now with opioid addiction and many other substance abuse problems. So we've really neglected that side, and we're leaving an amazing tool on the table of near-peer community, full-time people who will do that service and make a difference in areas that demand human capital. I made a huge list. I'm not going to read it to you, but we could do this, and that would actually help solve that problem.
So if I may just jump in on the scarcity of employees, we see that people really want to work for a purpose-driven company, and so our inclination to serve and to help communities, we think that's a huge attractor for our employee workforce, is to demonstrate that we're a purpose-driven company.
So when I was director of the Peace Corps, I think we had, Mary Ann's here, and others from Peace Corps, 10,000 applications for 3,500 positions. Now, I don't know that all 6,500 at the time were fit and ready to be a Peace Corps volunteer. But it always struck me that we were saying no. 6,500 Americans who were raising their hands to go to some very needy places across the planet to serve. And here from CNCS, the numbers of, you talk to undergraduates, Janine, others that have been in higher education, even wanting to come to the federal government or to different streams of service, they will say it's so competitive to get into teaching. It's so competitive to get into teaching. That's what you hear about. So I guess my question is this a communications problem that all of the above? So we don't have adequate information about all the various ways to serve? Are there barriers to service that you would commend to us to be thinking about? Or how do we think about unpacking some of this challenge?
We think about this all the time because this is what we do. So I'll just say we've built a one-stop shop for the civilian service programs, the full-time, full-year programs, so that we can now run campaigns. We do a lot of digital advertising. We don't have enough money to do the need that the advertising need that's out there. And the other thing is, and I hope this commission will think about, how do you create the expectation from an early age that you'll choose some kind of service? So if people were learning in middle school and high school about the variety of options, can be communicated by their parents and teachers that there's an expectation that you're going to pick one, go in a public service job, be a firefighter, a police officer, a teacher, or go on to the military and do a term of service there. Or, if you have a different path you want, there are a lot of, there should be a lot more full-time, full-year service options that are in what we would call service year, national service. If you had that expectation from when you were young, you would be, as you're the story you told, you'd be looking for those opportunities. And then, having the matching system that we have could be broader. It could include, it could include connections with military or public service. We're not doing that now.
So Ambassador, you were 8 when you said you wanted to be.
Yes.
How do you think you got to that point?
It was cool stuff. Dick Morrow was my hero. Serving America and doing things that I thought I'd be able to do. Yeah, the 50s were a difficult time in our country, dealing with the draft. But I can't tell you how many people I met on active duty that said I wouldn't be here if the judge hadn't sent me here and gave me an alternative. I think part of the challenge of creating a pool of eligible people to serve is, are there alternatives to a guy with a nickel bag of marijuana getting a criminal record or going to the military, which was offered in the 50s and 60s for juvenile delinquents who just weren't getting it. And the congressman mentioned he got his GED. Coming into the military, is that something we should be considering as well? Because people haven't decided at age 16 or 17 that they really understand how important high school education is. So I think we need to be broadening the base of opportunities for service, not necessarily in AmeriCorps or, but in other sorts of institutions to give kids alternatives. Where an institution makes a decision that, you're a good kid, you did something bad, if we put you into an institution where we think you can grow, you can grow from there. The other statistic for me, as we were kind of looking at veterans in the General Electric Company, the statistic I recall is 600,000 advanced manufacturing jobs in this country today. They cannot be filled because of the education level of the folks coming out of high school, in certain cases college. So I think you get back to the quality of education and whether the education system is producing the kind of graduates that are going to be needed to serve and to also fill those advanced manufacturing jobs that are out there. We're at 4.1% unemployment, which is almost full employment, yet there's still 600,000 jobs that can't be filled by people who are qualified technically to fill those jobs. So broadening that base, I think, is very important.
I think it also takes leadership as well. I think you're seeing more and more CEOs today become more active around issues of diversity. And it always helps when the leader of a company, when the leader of an institution rallies the troops. And I'll give you a case for UPS is our CEO, David Abney, the first public announcement that he made as CEO-elect in 2014 was to declare this decade the decade of service for UPS. And he did so at the Points of Light annual conference, and he urged the company that by 2020 we will have 20 million hours of service by UPS employees. And so just last year, our people contributed almost 3 million hours of service in their communities. And we are over 3/4 of the way there. So I think people are predisposed to serve. I think they have to have an opportunity. And I think once they serve, they'll go back and serve again. But I think it also takes leadership. And I think I see a trend of CEOs becoming more active in trying to fill gaps that they see among leadership.
Roger, you see that piece yesterday, the BlackRock CEO Lawrence Fink, 1,000 global CEOs. It's not enough come in with a good
Right.
financial bottom line, we have to do good for society. It was pretty direct language. Speaking for corporate America here, how do you think that will be? I mean, are we at an inflection point? Is he reflecting what you're seeing as evolving? Many of us have seen the private sector champion in impressive ways. Where are we?
And that's a perfect example of CEOs stepping in when they see gaps. And the gaps that are occurring around the world, the CEOs are aware that those gaps are going to come inside the four walls of the company. And so they need to step up and they need to demonstrate to their workforce where the company stands on certain issues. Now, with respect to the key position, the key of community for a company, I mean, I hearken back to our founder, Jim Casey. He founded the company as a 19-year-old with a bicycle, right? Now, he felt that in order to have a prosperous and inspired workforce, you need to have a healthy, safe, and prosperous community. So there is that shared value. But here again, what we're discovering more and more is that when individuals, when we look at it as a development opportunity for our people and for our leaders, to be out in the community, to understand the challenges of community, and to try to make a difference.
And let me turn to the military specifically. Of course, our charge is over here. Did you want to get into that as well?
I would,
Please, go ahead.
if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So I think a way to reach out, I think the junior ROTC program, so the JROTC in high school can be a really powerful program. That's not a recruiting program, by the way. That is a citizenship program. And so, but it teaches a lot of the service values. And quite honestly, the ones that I've seen flourish greatly are the ones that are close to military posts. So we want to spread that. I think we have about over 1,700 JROTC programs in the United States. And so I think just the empowering those programs to do the best that they can do. But you've got to reach the young people when in high school is when they've got to be reached. And earlier would be better, but because the opportunities, they just quickly go by once you get out of high school and you start working, then it's just the opportunities go away. You get into college, and if you don't pick opportunities while you're in college, or think about that, what's next, and you just keep going down the road of I know I'm not going to have a job when I get out. I'm going to have these loans. I think the education, the military, and I'm not just talking the Army, but I know all the services, they just offer some really tremendous programs right now. We just have the blended retirement system that's started up on the 1st of January. They have a matching, it's the equivalent, we have a TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan, that's the equivalent of the 401k. They match now, first year that they've matched. So if you serve 2 years, you're going to get out of the service with some money in your pocket. Tuition assistance. We have 199 career fields just in the Army alone. And 99% of those you can get credentials, civilian credentials, when you get out of the Army to go into the civilian sector. And so a lot of things that are out there that we just need to educate on, and the opportunities. All the things I've gotten I have gotten to do. Quite honestly, I could have never picked. If I had a wish list, I could not have picked some of the things that I have, the opportunities that have come about as a result of being in the military. And
let me continue that thread. So you're now second in command of 750,000 in 30-year distinguished career. And just what you just said, you never would have imagined. One of our charge here, and questions, as the senator said, and the congressman is on the military side in the elective service system. And so the question, and we're over the course of the next couple of years talking and listening, are eager to get all points of view on this. But I would be curious in terms of you, in terms of the requirement for women. So would that be something we should be thinking about and listening to, and your reflections on that?
my personal opinion is absolutely yes. We've opened up all of the combat positions. By the way, we've been deploying women with our brigade combat teams for the last decade, so it's not new. We opened up the last couple of positions in infantry and armor at the company level for women to integrate into. But I deployed in 2003, and there were women. I was a battalion commander flying in the 101st Airborne Division. I flew a brigade combat team around, my 30 helicopters and all my folks. So it's nothing that's new. And so one thing I did learn, I did not know that President Carter, in his proposal to reinstate the draft and or the selective service, the registration piece of that he put forward that women should also register for the draft. And in reading what Congress denied that, because they said that the starting point for the discussion is when the combat roles are not open to women. And so that's what Congress viewed as the starting point for that discussion back in 1980, and now they're open. So I just think that you want the best talent pool. When you have an all-volunteer force in the military, you want the best and the brightest that you can have in your military, and provide the opportunities and the education and that sort of thing of service. Whether they're going to stay, most of the folks that come into the military don't stay the entire career. There are different percentages, so I'm kind of an anomaly to stay as long as I have. But as you get higher in rank, the less positions there are. So, but I think we got to educate on the opportunities that are available.
So before we kick out questions from the audience here, let me just ask our great panel here, as we look to traveling to these different regions and listening over the course of the next couple of years, are there specific areas of the country, specific pockets, specific demographics that we really should be hearing from, and you would commend us to be especially attentive to as we think about how do we create and enhance the greater ethos of service in our country? What affirmative duty would you commend to us as we listen?
Well, I do have one statistic that I was surprised about, is you have the certain, I think it's 11 states that a majority of the military comes from. And so I think that included, I think, California, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Illinois, all the other states. What do they think? When we're getting over 50% from very few. Mm-hmm.
So to listen especially in those areas as to why that isn't. Shirley, anything that we should be?
I assume you'll really make an effort to get out into rural areas and the urban, different economic groups as well. I think that there is one of the strengths, I think, of national service has been people serve from all backgrounds, and it's easy to forget that, some people have a notion, it's only for privileged people to serve poor people, or this is something you do when you can't do something else. But I think you'll need to get all across the country for that.
I think you should continue to talk to business leaders in every community, and I think that what you'll find is an eagerness to engage and really talk from the same voice, with the same voice about service. Great opportunity. It's serendipitous that I'm here because I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Points of Light. They have a corporate service council, and I am incoming chair of that corporate service council. And this week we had our launch event for the service council, and there's 90 Fortune 500 companies that are part of that council, and these are all high-level executives that speak on behalf of their companies about how much they want to make a difference in their communities all over the world.
As I think about what I want to be listening for is selective service has a certain, people have a certain view of what selective service means. And is there a sentiment across the country, not so much about selective service to the military, but national service, and turning the selective service system into a registration for national service, and not so much linking it just to the military, but to the broader service needs of the country. And I think there's sentiment for that. And it would take some adjustment to the law.
Beyond military service.
Beyond military
So you're
service.
18 years old.
There are, well, you know,
You register.
you go into Job Corps, you go into AmeriCorps, you take a 2-year mission to, you know, to go somewhere where there's need. You go serve in the fire jumpers out in California, if that's kind of what you're interested in. But to broaden the idea of service within selective service to more than just military service.
So it's to Shirley's point, kind of this expectation.
And I think you'll find it. I think that in corporate America, there's very strong view towards community service and giving back to the community. You know, I'd be listening for how they see themselves doing that. We had a 24,000 person veterans network within GE. And that was a tremendous organization for outreach to veterans in terms of opportunities post-service. How can corporations help those who do serve continue their service to do so in the private sector in that transition? So I think
The final thing, we want to kick it out to the audience. We have a little time to engage some questions from this group. So let me open up the audience for folks to raise their hand and go at our panelists. First, my fellow commissioners, Chairman.
My question is for Ed. First, UPS should be commended for the dedication of 20 million hours of service. The question is, how does UPS encourage and/or incentivize their employees to participate and provide that service?
Great question. I think that we allow our employees to follow their passion, and most of them do. But we also work with organizations like Points of Light to provide opportunities for them to volunteer. We connect our philanthropy to volunteerism. So we have a local grant system all over the world. The UPS Foundation supports over 4,500 organizations in 170 countries. And in order for that UPSer to make a grant to an organization, that person has to put in 50 hours of community service with that organization. We also play to our strengths. So we do a lot of disaster relief, humanitarian relief, and we basically ask our people, logisticians, to volunteer, to do what they do for a living, but to help out communities, and they love it. Another key area for us is road safety, right? We've been driving vehicles since they were invented, and so we have drivers that teach young drivers their safety techniques. So that encourages volunteerism. And so from that point forward, we work with United Way, and it perpetuates. We work with the Peace Corps, and we work with a number of organizations around the world, because we also see the importance of volunteers in general to civil society. Civil society depends, 30% of their workforce are volunteers. So the foundation makes investments, and one of our 4 focus areas is service or volunteerism. So we invest in Points of Light, and we invest in the Peace Corps, because we know the value and the importance of volunteers around the world.
Yes, sir.
I'd be interested in hearing the development of a definition of service. I'm hearing a variety here. One is volunteer service. One is a career that's well compensated, or at least compensated at some level. It's decided as a matter of government definition as a service. Then there are the peculiar services, such as the military and the fire jumpers, where it's really uncompensadable. In other words, one cannot equate a life-giving or a life-taking enterprise with a particular amount of money or benefit. Even though we've heard a lot about benefits, ultimately there's a high moral component of the service that takes lives and skills.
The definition of service.
Well, I'll just start with I don't think we have a definition for all service. It's a complicated word. When we were doing our branding, we tried really hard to find a different word because service is also who, people bring you your dishes in a restaurant. And there's a lot of ways that that word is used. For us, we decided to build some boundaries around what we would count as a service year. So it has to be paid, because you can waive your right to pay if you can afford to. And most people need money to be able to do full-time for a year on anything. It has to be making a difference. So the positions have to be aimed at solving a problem that the community or country or nation has. And we actually certify positions, so if they're so we can look and see, is this actually fitting the definition. The programs that we put on our website, serviceyear.org, also have to help build the skills and work experience of the people who are serving. So they do get something from that experience. We have our criteria on our website, and we're always looking to add new positions.
Is it as hard as it might seem, or is this the Justice Potter Stewart? You don't when you see it.
Yeah, we put some boundaries around it. The length of time, the amount of hours, that kind of stuff. But if you can articulate what's going to get done as a result of this person doing this year of service, that's probably good enough. Now, to get money from AmeriCorps, you have to have measurable outcomes. There's a lot of things you have to do to get the federal money. But where it's privately funded, we're really looking to make sure it's not just a bad job packaged up as a service position. We really want to make sure it's in much the way higher ed institutions have to be accredited. We are trying to play that role for the field of service year programs.
Mind you, service is intensive personal, in my view. Why you serve, where you serve, the opportunities to serve range from soup kitchens in churches across this country that are serving homeless, and people really feel passionately about helping those who are going through tough times, up to and including military service, and all that's in the middle of it. So I would strongly be in favor of a broader interpretation rather than a narrow interpretation, because that service activity occurs in our communities every day. Every day someone's out serving. The question is, how is what you're doing contributing to making your community better, your nation better, the world better? I kind of track CNN Heroes, which I think is kind of a great program to understand the incredible things people are doing across this world to help people improve their lives, improve their communities, and those sorts of things. I think those things are happening. How you define them more broadly and bring them into the circle of what service means in this country, I think is something I would certainly look at.
With this extraordinary panel in front of us, I wonder if you have a view on key recommendation that you think the commission should be making based on your experience and knowledge, or a key issue that you think we should definitely be looking at in the context of our resolution. Could you highlight what that might be?
First for me would be opportunities to serve. Are standards and rules so strict that people who could be serving don't get the opportunity? Are there opportunities to broaden that group, not lowering standards, but understanding whether those standards are realistic in light of today's population? It may look a little bit more like the 50s and the 70s in terms of
I would say in terms of how to connect with society and the opportunities like AmeriCorps and the Peace Corps and the military and that sort of thing. How do you, and the over 50% come from a very small percentage of the states. For example, for the military, how do we, through our communities and our teachers, and how do we best get the word out to our young people about the opportunities that are out there for service? I think is another one. You know, are they hearing? Are they seeing? Are they getting any information? Quite honestly, I was talking to our folks in our Manpower and Reserve Affairs yesterday for the Army, and I said all the commercials I see are all the Wounded Warrior commercials. I'm not seeing any of our Army commercials. I'm not seeing any more Marine Corps commercials. There's no Air Force. So where and when are these commercials coming on? Because it says we're doing these, but I don't see them. So I don't. I think all of those are very much needed. But it also sends a message too, I think, that join the military and you get hurt. So, you know, we might, with those programs, we don't want to send that message either. So there's a place for both of them.
Not surprisingly, I'm going to say I think that there needs to be more government investment in civilian service programs. You can't have a call for large-scale service unless you dramatically ramp up the positions that aren't in the military. And that needs government money. That can lift private money. I mean, none of these, very few positions in America are actually 100% federally funded. They mostly are leveraging an equal amount of other sources. And if we did it in a smart way, we could solve some of these problems that are actually leading to this smaller pool of people who are eligible to serve in the military. And I also would urge you to think about how do you give some measures of local control to creating these positions and managing them. Even think about scaling this up in a sort of local pilot system to see what would happen is if if Memphis, Tennessee, or Louisiana, the entire state had a chance to do service at scale. What difference would that make?
I think that elevating the importance of service would really energize the sector. Really energize the sector, and we talked about all the virtues and the benefits that inure to the people that serve and to the communities that receive that service. But I do believe, and this is a Points of Light slogan, is that service unites, right? And in a world now that seems to be more fractured than ever, I think service is an area that, and we look at it as well within our company, that it's great team building. It's great, to get out into the community, to get out into the inner cities, to have multi-stakeholder engagement. It will bring more harmony to those communities.
Charlie, my question's for you. You mentioned a statistic earlier that 1 in 4, 1 in 5 young Americans had expressed that interest in national service. But I'm curious, the details of that question, was an incentive attached to that, like an education award, or was it just like service or volunteering in general?
Thanks, that's a great question. Thank you for your service. We described a program in which you would spend a year serving full-time in exchange for money for college. So it's very much dependent on having a structure that's focused that way. I'll add, it's interesting, we have on our platform, we actually have a question. So we've had over 70,000 profiles created, and about 20,000 people have answered a question on our profile on our site that says, why do you want to serve? And I just want to share, we haven't released this data, but I guess I'm releasing it right now. The number one answer at 64% is making a difference by far. That is the main, they write it, we've done some text analysis to figure this out. Second, at 32%, is career advancement. 22% giving back, 9% finding purpose in their lives, and 6% travel and exploration. So it's an interesting spectrum, but people are very altruistically motivated, but having those, making it not a bad detour in your life is important too. So that's where the education award is important.
Does that data ring true to you?
Excuse me?
Does that data ring true to your experience with the colleagues you've seen in the military?
Sure, it does. It was actually run true more from my AmeriCorps experience. So right out of high school, that's what I was looking for. An opportunity to serve since I was on my own to pay for college. And so having that AmeriCorps opportunity to help get my foot in the door at the University of Colorado, which I have some colleagues here, that was absolutely the incentive for me. And then just wonderful opportunities continue to present themselves to allow to serve in the military. But personally speaking, I couldn't have done my year in AmeriCorps if there hadn't been that education award attached to it to help me continue to pay for college. So I was just wondering if that was the case for your survey as well. So thanks.
I think my comment's more for the commission than the panel, but at the end of the panel, we've heard very little except for Ambassador Taylor about some of the faith-based groups that are in churches and other faith-based groups that have been running service programs for decades since before the Peace Corps. So I hope the commission will be talking to those groups as well about how it hear their concerns. And I guess my question is, how can people? I've seen from your literature encouraging people to go to a website to give comments. But I know you're planning to travel. How will people around the country know you're going to be coming? If you're going to have a public hearing, how will people get signed up to give their input?
Well, I welcome my chair's comments on this as well. To your first question, there's no question. Obviously, I think every commissioner has a personal appreciation for what the faith community has done in terms of service. Whether that's a great university, in the case of Notre Dame, to individual experiences, but the faith traditions factor very significantly into it. So there's no question about this narrow conversation may not fully elucidate that. Don't be under any misconception in terms of the importance with which we place it, the energy that we bring to engaging faith leaders because of their engagement in the service sector and our key interests. So point very much well taken. Appreciate the fact this is, as Chairman Heck said, a startup operation. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the staff, which I commend publicly here, we have an extraordinary staff, but understand the digits on your two hands are more than the number of staff that have pulled this launch off. So patience may be a little required if we're patient, but so they're getting started up in interesting and important ways. The website is one of them, inviting public comments. Social media will be another. Certainly the website in terms of federal notice, all the federal requirements from the register and the like for convocations, as the chair announced in Harrisburg. So there'll be ample time. The website will be the key opportunity both for the public-facing announcement piece of this, like the first convocation that we'll have in Harrisburg, but also importantly eliciting the input, both individually in cases like this, and through social media and the website. So we are engaging every tool that's before us. And you'll see it ramped up, is what I'm mostly trying to say. That we've launched this well since September 19th, but it will be even better in the months ahead, I think, in terms of seeing the essence of it. You have a question?
Sorry. So the context of the commission forming was about public service, but there was also a very close element of reviewing the draft, the compulsory element. Is there a place for compulsory service today?
Minor question. Compulsory service. It's a good one. Yeah.
I think there's always a place for compulsory service in society. The question is, how broad do you want to define where people can go to serve? And not everyone's going to join the military, not everyone's going to join AmeriCorps, but I think this notion that as a member of society, you have an obligation, compulsory obligation to give back your time to that society is, I think, a very strong principle, and one that, in certain ways, I think our nation's lost.
And compulsory to required to expectation, we're on this sort of spectrum. Would you commend us to?
I just think maybe some examples and showing some examples of those possibilities. I think parents are I just think that parents, teachers, everybody in the community, religious folks in the churches and things like that work with youth are just, it's important that they're educated too, not just educating our youth, but are educated on what's out there in terms of all the different types of service.
I'm actually not sure you get as good an outcome if it's a compulsory in the sense that you go to jail if you don't serve. The way we've thought about it is how can we make it such an inevitability that you are going to do it, or if you're not looked well upon. We have 500 employers of national service who are saying, we're going to give a leg up to those who serve. What if that became a much bigger thing? What if higher ed made a much bigger deal out of, the connection to service? What if, we recognized it in the broader kind of service in a bigger way? I think you'd get more people wanting to serve, and you'd have less sort of, this is a country that values freedom, and so that kind of tension is going to make it really hard to get there. I think you'll get more cooperation, and people will come to their service with the right spirit if you think about it in a universal sense rather than a mandatory sense.
I would agree. I don't think that it would be beneficial really to force community service on our people. I think it's almost self-evident that you would garner more participation, more impact, just by making it what it is, voluntary.
I just have one more comment. I think we move beyond that in the military, though, with the standards now, and so I would not. I would say that we would need to look at that if we were going to lower standards, because we've gone to a point. But we had the standards discussion before, so with the most of the disqualifications, or as Representative Kaufman was saying, 75% aren't eligible, and a lot of that is just from, I think, obesity is the larger part of that. And so what is the national movement, or do we put health classes back into the high schools and that sort of thing in terms of when you're going back to the eligible population or pool. Also, it goes to medical care and all those kinds of things too, is a healthy lifestyle. So how do you put back in? But I like what Shirley said about positive things too. Have positive reinforcement versus the negative.
I have a question about civil service, particularly government service, which we haven't really talked a lot about today. There's been a lot of conversation about VISTA, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, military service. 35% or so of federal employees, at least 2 million Americans serving in the federal government, come from the military. But there's this kind of growing and two-generation of kind of disrespect for civil servants among some parts of our population, and these are the folks who are going to leverage, federal assets and resources to help deliver programs, working with industry, working with folks who are volunteering in the community. So, what role does the Commission plan on playing in kind of restoring some respect for civil servants who are working in government at all levels, and also, on the kind of labor economics, war for talent conversation? How do we ensure that the government is able to compete for talent in the 21st century, so that society as a whole can be leveraged together and to work towards some of these big, broad national challenges that the government is going to have to play a role in?
Well, it's an excellent question, and Joe can chime in here. The Commission was fortunate to hear from Matt Steyer, who is the president of the Partnership for Public Service, where we placed in preliminary way some of these very important issues like federal workforce, the demographics, women demographics that exist, the barriers to federal service. And informally, as a commission, we talked about it. So while this panel may not have the capacity to reflect every aspect of our definition, as in terms of the faith-based element of it, it is certainly an intended part of our work. And we'd invite your perspective on that, because the barriers to service, I think, is a thread we've heard here, from the military to public service to national And those are some of the issues the Commission is very much looking to unpack. While we may not be able to solve each and every one of them, to put it front and center before the Congress and the President with our recommendations. But Joe, I don't know, do you want to have anything?
I think the enabling statute defines military, national, and public service for the purposes of the Commission. Military self-explanatory. In the national service piece, that includes elected office and governmental service at both the federal and state and local level. So it is part of our mandate, and we will be pursuing that.
I would observe the obvious, but we attached it in some important way, because of course our first speaker, Earl Bowman, is a state colleague and employee, and so his evidence of that part of the is sort of perfect poster boy here for us in all sorts of ways. That does include important public service that we've understood at the state level. Point well taken. Another question? Yes.
I just had a question around demographics. So a lot of the conversation seems to be around early interception, right? High school or earlier, early career, that sort of thing. I don't know if there are a lot of opportunities to serve mid-career, or if, in particular, the military has looked at those maybe who have gone out for 4 or 5 or 6 years and become disenfranchised with where they thought they were going to go versus where they are.
Mid-career service. I know when I was in Peace Corps, 8 or 9% were over 50. So there are opportunities for service, but other things we don't.
So I think it's something to be quite honest with you, I don't know where we are on if we are looking at that for older Americans. I say the bulk of our population in the military is the 17 to 24-year-olds. As we know, and as I talked about earlier, the higher you go, the less positions there are. So there are opportunities. In fact, Deb might be able to tell me what the age limit is now. That you can, I think it's around 28 or something like that, and after that you can't join the military anymore. But maybe that's something that we do look at. Now I will also in the reserves and the National Guard tend to have an older population in some cases, and so that is an area that another part of service that is not just the active component that can be considered as well.
The looming demographics and baby boomers retiring, or is this something the private sector is looking at in terms of?
Absolutely. I think over the years we haven't done as good a job as we could in reaching out for our retirees, but certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, particularly around volunteerism. When you bring them back, they want to teach young drivers how their techniques, and they want to mentor, and they want to do the things that they did when they were employed. So I think our retiree community is strong and very, very inclined to help.
Just to speak to the transition point, a lot of people do AmeriCorps as a transition year. And the Corporation for National Service has done a study that showed that for people who are unemployed, if you volunteer, your odds of finding a job are much higher than people who don't volunteer. So there is really something in that to speak to that transition experience.
I would like to make just one more point on the post 9/11 GI Bill. So as a result of that, since 2009, I think over 340,000 veterans have gotten a secondary degree or gotten a degree as a result of the GI Bill. And so speaking to the demographic or the older ones, so the folks that have come in and served and then have gotten out and gotten their education, what we found, the veterans are more likely to volunteer, they're more likely to vote, they're more likely to be involved in the community. They generally have a higher GPA. There's all kinds of statistics that the veterans' health, the veterans, there's an index out there that measures for veterans. And so in terms of the other population, being a little bit older, they've done a military service, they've gone out and gotten a degree, and now they're ready for the next step.
Yeah, in reference to declining propensity to serve, what do you think is the factor for this?
declining propensity to serve, some of the factors, the obstacles to service? It's a good question. It's one that's very central to our work. You talked about the physical, legal intervention.
Our older veterans retiring, the relatives that folks have, a lot of the, in terms of who serves, generally have a relative that has served, and so that connection is dwindling down. We have less members of Congress that have military service that serve as compared to like in the 70s and the 80s, and so you have less of a connection for folks that are out there to serve. So how do you would increase that propensity? I think that getting after the just how you go about recruiting, like before just a little while ago, I said I don't see any commercials on TV. Well, most of our young people don't watch TV, and so you have to be geared towards what they are watching and what they are looking at in terms of the education piece. I think of it.
And in civilian service, I mean,
There are barriers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who want to serve, but a couple of things. One is awareness is a huge barrier. If you don't know to look, then you don't find it. Second, it is expensive. I mean, you don't get paid very much to do a year of service. The AmeriCorps living allowance is around $12,500. The Ed Award is about $6,000. If you don't have any resources to fall back on, that's a kind of hard package. So there is that barrier. We hear a lot of cries for, differential living allowances and things, and that costs more money. And student loans, we hear a lot about the problem that, there's so many young people who have massive student loans. So for them, even though they get an Ed Award and they can defer payments, they still feel the need to take a more lucrative job because they need to get going on their life, and if these loans will get in the way of their being able to have a house and support children, et cetera. So those are some of the barriers we hear a lot.
Okay, you want to start final question?
Hi, everybody. First, thank you to the panelists for a really interesting discussion, and to the Commission for what you're doing on a startup effort. I have a question sort of about intergenerational conversations and understanding and sort of representation of young folks in all of this process. It sounds like there is a plan sort of to get outreach or input from a lot of folks across the country, but I think we all know it can really make a difference when the people who you're talking about have a seat at the table and in the decision-making process. So I'm just wondering, I guess, is there a plan to sort of have millennial or Gen Z whisperers as part of the decision-making process so that young people can sort of speak for themselves as well as these decisions are being made?
Well, speaking for the demographically challenged commission in this regard, absolutely. It was quite intentional to start with Rural Home. It's been quite intentional every month since we've been meeting since September to begin with some reflections. I returned Peace Corps volunteer and is here in Washington, teaching by others in the active duty military to make sure that we're listening. And that thread will very much be consistent throughout the hearing process that we'll have all around the country, trying to employ the kinds of social media and communication streams that resonate with millennials and Gen Z, so that we're certainly taking stock of it. So I would say right back at you, a good question. Suggestions that you would have, follow-up that you would have to us, we're very much anxious to employ that. We know well the importance of that, because in many ways our charge is beyond millennials. It's the generation. And that's very different. Every demographer and looking at this cohort is very different. So we have talked about this, which is well acknowledged. We need to be very much in that space to ensure that our recommendations to the Congress and the President are appropriate, apt, resonant with the generation, and fulfilling the mission that the Congress has given to us. But that was a great question, a perfect place for us to, I think, wrap up here. So we, again, on behalf of our fellow commissioners, we extend our thanks first to our panel. What a great group of people. You've given us so much to think about in terms of expanding opportunities, to serve some of the barriers that exist, the role of the private sector, certainly the opportunities going to scale and how that could confront some of the nation's most vexing problems and challenges. We thank especially Earl Bowman for leading us off. We thank you for your service. You'll do that. We're gonna get you out.
Next month.
You got this down, man. We thank you, sir. I said at the outset, this is a startup, and our chair made that point at the very beginning. But startups have challenges and complexities, and so to those who, right from the beginning, Austin was recognized from Abernathy, our executive director, to the staff that are here. They've done an extraordinary job in a very, very limited time. As those of you who put together events can fully appreciate. So we thank our staff. We are assisted by the Fellowship of the Service Organizations, from the Pentagon to CNCS, Sandy Scott's expertise, to the Peace Corps, and all our partners in the government that certainly added to this. And last, and significantly, I thank the Commission. I'm grateful to Senator Reid for this important appointment. But I would tell our audience colleagues, you have, and the 11 folks here, I'll speak to after the 10 others, a really extraordinary group of Americans who are really taking this assignment very, very seriously. Coming to Washington every month, thinking through these issues. But as Joe said at the outset, we will not be successful and robust and fully complete without the input of so many organizations and groups. So while this is our launch, this is the beginning, your networks, your outreach, your counsel to us could not be more important. We believe, a unique charge. Never before has this shared mission been united with military, national, and public service. Never before, seemingly, has this inflection point been apparent from the government to the private sector. And as we conclude here on the day, perhaps, of a government shutdown and the challenges of contemporary federal government life here, service may be very much an opportunity of unity. This very commission is a testament to bipartisan cooperation. Senator McCain, the words that Joe read, and Senator Reid teaming up to do this. The nature of our appointments reflects the bipartisan spirit of the service ethic in our country. We will affirm to that and hopefully be very supportive of these successes. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for
John, give me like, when you get